On December 1st, 1955, barely 3 months after the murder of Emmett Till, Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat, which was designated for white people only, on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. Welcome to the Story of Civil Rights, Part 2. Last time, we talked about some of the treatment that was being protested during the Civil Rights Movement, both the treatment in the South, in the Jim Crow segregated areas, and the general discrimination and inequality faced by minorities, especially African Americans, in the United States. Today we're going to get into a little bit more of the methods, and the last time we talked about the legal challenges and the culminating court cases of Brown v. Board of Education. Today we're going to talk about some of the civil disobedience, some of the more famous methods. And then we'll also talk about the lasting issues in the civil rights movement into today. So we left off talking about Emmett Till, and that's one of the hardest events, topics to teach I've found, because it's just so gruesome and heinous, and the images were so shocking. And they were shocking to Rosa Parks, who had been an activist in her own right in Alabama, but she claimed later that she was just fed up, and one of the things that had depressed her was the murder of Emmett Till. She had never had children of her own, but she absolutely adored children. And she testified to this, and Douglas Brinkley wrote a brilliant biography of Rosa Parks in which he documented this extensively, just how much the Emmett Till murder actually was a huge inspiration for her activism. But what she did is she triggered a movement to actually boycott the bus line in Montgomery, Alabama, which was predominantly ridden by African Americans. This boycott lasted for more than a year throughout violent resistance, and they managed to remain peaceful. And of course, this brought to the national prominence the Southern preacher Martin Luther King Jr. It gave him national recognition for his leadership of civil disobedience, his avowal to remain peaceful, even amidst violent backlash, and his embrace of a multi-ethnic, diverse society. He would be criticized by some for actually being kind of anti-revolutionary, in that he wanted black people to assimilate into white society, and he encouraged black people to adopt Christianity and listen to classical music and kind of adopt white culture. And he was criticized by some kind of Afrocentric leaders for not embracing some of the black resistance movements enough. But he was definitely a kind of assimilationist, and this brought him a lot of national recognition. His organization was called the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and they helped to inspire a lot of different civil disobedience actions across the South. So you've probably heard on a lot of this. I'm going to fast forward ahead through the late 50s into the 60s to the famous I Have a Dream speech. And this was actually right before the Congress was pressured into acting. And finally, by 1964, after thousands and thousands marched upon Washington and Martin Luther King delivered his legendary speech, one of the absolutely most inspirational speeches in American history, this moved the Congress to actually finally act. And in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, and it officially prohibited segregation. It officially prohibited discrimination in education, employment, and in other public venues. And it also gave the executive branch the full authority to actually enforce these laws. So it essentially nixed this question about the states being able to choose whether or not they enforced these federal statutes. And this was directed predominantly to control the South. Incidentally, this was also the turning point for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party had long been the party of the South, the Southern farmer, going back to Thomas Jefferson, who started the Democratic Republicans in the very early 1800s, in I think, or the late 1700s, I should say. And the Democrats had always been the party of the poor Southern farmer, and they were the pro-slavery party. The Republicans were the party that were the abolitionist party in the Civil War era. And this is the turning point in 1964, 100 years after the Civil War, when the parties flip. The Democrats, led by Lyndon Baines Johnson, had been led by John F. Kennedy Jr., who was assassinated a year earlier. The Democrats pushed the civil rights legislation through, and Lyndon Johnson said when it happened that he had just lost the Democratic Party for the South forever. And since the 1960s, the South has mostly voted for Republican leadership. So at that point, the Democrats had become more of the party of the minorities and the working class and the kind of social programs that favor minorities. The Republicans have become more of the party of, it's predominantly white is the representation. Now, one of the other really famous incidents that happened that was led by Martin Luther King was the Selma March. And this happened actually as a response to efforts to control voter registration. So once the Civil Rights Act was passed, Martin Luther King did not stop. And in fact, he said, we need to register more blacks to vote in the South so that we can change the balance of power in the South, especially with KKK leadership and KKK representation in the Congress even. But this was often met with violence. And the most famous incident was in Selma, Alabama. As marchers were trying to leave Selma, the police actually surrounded them. They beat and tear gassed and let loose dogs and fire hoses. And it was bloody. There were many people who were, many different casualties, injuries. And this lasted for about 5 days. But the Bloody Sunday was televised all across the country, and there was horror seen as the police cracked down upon this peaceful protest. But the protest mostly remained peaceful, remarkably. And this gained more and more national support for voting rights. So one of the key impacts here was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And this basically made it completely illegal to try to put any kind of conditions on voting, whether it was literacy tests or voter qualification tests or poll taxes or any of the methods that were used to suppress voters in the past. So let's finish up this topic by talking about some of the lasting issues that live on after the Civil Rights Movement. We've already seen that there were riots in Newark, and there were riots each summer from 1965 to 1969. There was violence, there were buildings set on fire, people got killed, there was massive property damage, and there was huge economic devastation in several different cities because of this. Watts in Los Angeles, Chicago and Cleveland, and Newark and Detroit in 1967. So these had lasting impacts, including the fact that white America is still scared of revolutionary African American ideology. And this is evident partially in the gun laws. You can see that the strictest gun laws are in the places that have the most substantial African American populations. New York, Chicago, Washington, D.C., even in Atlanta is relatively strict compared to the rest of the South. So there is some serious devastation that happens as a result of the civil rights movement and the failed recognition of a lot of the missions of the leadership of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King is assassinated, and this causes an incredible amount of anger. And more by the 70s, the movement turned towards the power, the Black Power ideology. So instead of actually embracing Martin Luther King's vision of love and peaceful coexistence with whites, leaders like Stokely Carmichael, seen here, revived the old views of Marcus Garvey that African Americans and the African diaspora, the descendants of slaves, needed to unite in creating a separate society for black people by black people. This is Stokely Carmichael here, who was very famous in the late 60s and pushing the Black Power, Black Panther ideology. Here you can see some pictures of the Black Panthers. I know the picture's a little blurry, apologize, but you can see them carrying openly shotguns, and often they carried machine guns, AK-47s, and this was an intimidating presence. There was a signal that there was a violent resistance going on. So the Black Panther Party started in the late 60s under the leadership of Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, and this, of course, scared white America greatly, to the point where the FBI really basically took, with programs like COINTELPRO, if you guys want to read more about that, the government basically infiltrated the Black Power movement and systematically eliminated its leadership by finding them guilty of different crimes and putting them in jail. And a couple of them have actually fled or in exile, like Assata Shakur. But the Black Power movement basically dissipated by the 70s because of how much it scared white America. And one of the most famous faces of this fear in white America would be Malcolm X. So he did not start, Elijah Muhammad started, but he was probably the most famous, certainly the most famous, except maybe Louis Farrakhan. Malcolm X is more famous than Louis Farrakhan. But anyway, he is one of the most charismatic leaders of an organization called the Nation of Islam. And he advocated cultural expressions of Black power, like basically resisting white style, embracing African hairstyles, afros, Black studies programs. He also wanted to clean up the way that Black people viewed themselves and spoke about themselves. He didn't want the word Negro to be used anymore. And by 1965, he was assassinated, along with many other leaders of the Black movement. So, the most shocking to white America was the assassination of Martin Luther King. But it also had a huge impact on the Black Power movement. It wasn't just shocking to white America, but to Black America and to Black Christian America. He was the symbol of the peaceful hope. And a lot of people really, really lost hope in the idea of peaceful coexistence. I love Bell Hooks. Actually, I should probably uncapitalize her name here. She generally writes her name without capital letters, I should say. But she's a Black feminist who wrote a lot in the 70s and 80s and 90s. And she argued that after the assassination of Martin Luther King, both the feminist movement and the civil rights movements grew very cynical. So cynical means that you don't really believe in higher ideals anymore. So they didn't want to build a more tolerant America anymore. They focused on gaining power. And this led to a much more angry and much more kind of tribalistic and anti-democratic wing of the Black Power movement emerged. And to Bell Hooks, her argument was that this hurt the movement's appeal and its legitimacy, and the whole kind of melding between the hippie movement, the nonviolent, peaceful movement, and the kind of Martin Luther King vision for society was lost. And therefore, there's a lot of people seeking vengeance rather than coming from a place of love. And she saw that as a real negative for the movement and for America. Okay, so I got to talk about the ways that the civil rights movement still interacts with our conversations today. And you may hear the terminology of critical race theory come up in society sometimes. So critical race theory is a movement that emerges from lawyers, Black lawyers, defending Black rights in the 70s, saying that the legal reforms really didn't solve a lot of the problems in society, and that whiteness, this term that doesn't just apply to white people, but it applies to a kind of privilege of being insulated from being victimized by the kind of racism that a lot of people live with on a daily basis, that still predominates in society, that our democratic values are built on Eurocentric systems of knowledge and values and morality and philosophy about nature and about other things. And that white people often carry a kind of unconscious bias they're not even aware of when dealing with non-whites. And a lot of these race theorists might argue that white supremacy is still the foundation for our society, but it goes unacknowledged because we claim to sometimes be beyond that kind of issue. But critical race theorists would argue that racism isn't necessarily individual behavior, but it's also that there are structures that have historically set up, like systems of property and systems of education, have set up people of color to be at a huge disadvantage. And while many whites still believe that we have moved beyond racism, and they say that it's really just a matter of personal responsibility. People have to, hike up their bootstraps and try harder if they want to make it in America, where they can't use race as an excuse anymore. A lot of critical race theorists would say that that's just completely ignorant, that it's like a fish not really realizing that they're in the water and that they have this advantage in swimming the whole time. So, what do you guys think about this? Does racism remain the underlying driver of our society? Leave an opinion about this, about critical race theory or the civil rights movement in general. What was the most interesting thing to you? Take care, everybody.